Upon Deaf Ears was the first Black Halo song ever released, and this is the behind-the-scenes video about the writing, performing, and recording of this song. Upon Deaf Ears is one of the first songs that was written specifically for this album. Now, what I mean by that is that this was the style of music I was doing originally, all the way back in my teens. But then at some point in my 20s, I started doing instrumental guitar instead, and I was doing that for a long time. I still am. But I wasn't really getting anywhere releasing music doing that, although please go check out my Spotify channel. It's Randy Ellefson. And so the issue with this is that I wanted to go back to my roots and start doing two-guitar metal band stuff, even though I'm now doing all the guitars myself. It's not because I'm a control freak. I've just been doing everything by myself for so many decades that at this point, I don't know that there's really a room for another creative guitarist in the band. I can actually do an entire album by myself. And I'm not saying that to brag. It was usually caused by other people dropping the ball. Even in fact, with this album, the original singer was supposed to write all the lyrics and he kept not doing it. So I ended up having to take over writing the lyrics. This is something that has happened for, unfortunately, most of my creative life. And it's pretty annoying. But the good part of that is that I have picked up other skills because of this. So I was always thinking about going back to writing this kind of music, and I had some older songs lying around like The Wake and Sign Language, and I knew I could use those. But of course, I didn't have enough for an album, in my opinion, at the time. I actually did have enough for it. I just hadn't really looked at some of the other songs that I had lying around. Those other songs will be on the subsequent Black Halo albums. So if you like material like that, I've got more of it. And I wanted to write some newer material to see if I could still do this also and just see what kind of material I was going to write. And so this was one of the first songs that I wrote. And it's one of the batches of songs that made me realize, okay, I've got a pretty good album in the works, so I'll start writing more of them. One of the things about me writing a song is that for the longest time since the mid-90s, I have a tendency to write a song in the exact order that you hear it in. Now, I don't mean writing the riffs and then the vocal melodies that are over the top of that. I mean just all the rhythm guitar parts. It tends to be written in order. And this is true of this song as well. As it turns out, this entire song was written on a steel string acoustic, and it was most likely my old trusty faithful one, the black guitar. I've had this since the 80s. My entire acoustic guitar style was developed on this, and this is probably the main acoustic guitar you hear on most of my acoustic guitar songs, or parts of them. I do have another one that's newer that I got in 2005, and they sound pretty similar to each other, so I can't actually tell when I listen to a recording which one I used, but that's the one that I wrote everything on. Now, for the music theory geeks out there, I do have a secondary dominant in this song. I'm going to quickly explain that because I don't want to bore all of you who don't know music theory, but at the end of the main riff, I'm going to do a 5-1 into G major, except that G major key change is actually a false key change. I'm immediately going to go to C for the verse that's coming after that. So it goes like this, 5, 1, but then I go there into C. I'd give you a longer explanation, but I know that those of you who don't know music theory would get a little confused by that because it is a confusing subject. But basically, a 5-1 motion, the 5 is called the dominant chord, and it makes the 1 chord sound like it's home. That's the 1, 5, 1. The problem is that I'm actually going 5, 1 into C major right after that. I probably shouldn't even explain that much of this. So that secondary dominant was not something that was planned. I don't typically plan things like key changes. I'm classically trained. I was a classical composition major before I switched to classical guitar. It's a whole other story what happened with that. But I do use a lot of the classical theory in my writing when I can. But it's not that I'm planning it or I'm not trying to show off. I just see the opportunity to do something and I go ahead and do it. In the other behind the scenes songs, videos of these songs, you will sometimes hear me talk about this as well with other things. The guitar solo in the middle of this song is one that I really felt ambivalent about for the longest time. I basically didn't really like it, and I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it. If you know a lot about this album, you know most of it was written and recorded between 2009 and 2011, but then it got held up for a really long time, and it wasn't finished until around 2024. This is crazy. I'm going to do a whole series of videos about that, but during all those years, every time I listened to the song, I thought, I don't really like my guitar solo on this. And there is one reason for that. It's got 4 phrases, and normally I would write the solo from the start, like you would expect, phrase 1, 2, 3, and then 4. This one was actually written backwards. Now, that wasn't done on purpose. I was improvising through the song, and the first phrase that I thought of was the 4th one. So I was like, okay, I got the end of my solo. Let me see if I can write something that leads into that. And I did. And then I wrote something that led into that. So it was written in the order of 4, 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. And to some extent, I think you can almost tell it might not be the most natural sounding solo that I've done. Certainly not compared to something like Darkness Falls, where that was just written off that opening bend that I do, and then everything kind of flowed right from that. So it's kind of a strange solo in that sense, but I've grown to like it, and I think it helped when Chase did the final vocals on it. It just seemed to come together a little bit better that way. This is the song where the most vocalists sang on this. It is one of the two songs that I used for auditioning people, along with Darkness Falls, which is what Chase Breedlove auditioned with. But not only that, I'll do another video about this, but I went through 6 different singers over about 7 years, and all but 2 of them sang this song. And one of the interesting things about this is that the vocal melody for the chorus, it never sounded great with anybody singing that. And it was something where I recognized it, the singers sometimes recognized it, but no one would ever suggest something. They would just say, I don't really like that. And I would say, yeah, I know, I don't like it either, but I can't think of anything different. Now, what's interesting about this is that the melody is still in the song. It is played by me on lead guitar at the beginning of the song. So that was the original vocal melody for the chorus. And this isn't an ego thing, but it sounded to me great on guitar, but it just didn't seem to work when someone sang it. And I still don't know why. I tried to fix this repeatedly over the years as the album was held up for over a decade. Never liked what I came up with. I did go through 6 singers over the years, but there was, if you were to number them 1 through 6, well, there was a kind of singer 0. He was a friend of mine that I was in an Iron Maiden tribute band with. He was never really going to be the guy because just like me, he had his own thing going and he didn't want to be too distracted by being in my band as well. So part of what happened there is he just did a test pass for me of this song. And when he did the vocal delivery, it sounded kind of whiny. And I don't know if he did that on purpose or what it was, but that impression really stuck with me. And it really affected my opinion of the lyrics. And so I really didn't like my lyrics for the longest time because of this. The subject of the lyrics has changed slightly, and originally when this first singer 0 did the lyrics, the song was more about friends and family not really noticing that you're in some sort of trouble. When you're trying to tell them about it, they're just like, yeah, I got my own stuff. Or, oh, it'll be fine. So it was supposed to be a complaint kind of about people not listening. And it was supposed to be more angry, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you not listening to me? But the first singer sang it more like, oh, no one's listening to me, And so that was not the intention. And it's kind of funny when you write stuff, people can interpret it very differently than you meant to. And hearing someone sing it back to me like that, I was like, oh, yeah, no, that was not the style of this. It's not supposed to be this pity song. It's supposed to be what is wrong with you kind of thing. That's a very common thing in metal. I know when grunge first showed up in the early 90s, a lot of the lyrics to me and other people sounded like they were just beating themselves up because sometimes they really were. They were just feeling, oh, I'm such a loser or whatever, And I never really liked songs that were like that for the most part. I mean, I get there's an audience for that kind of thing, but metal's much more angry. Like, what's wrong with you or the world or this or that? And that was supposed to be the vibe. So unfortunately, that first singer's performance made me not like these lyrics, and I really just kept thinking, I need to redo these. I'll be doing more videos about the backstory on this whole album, but as far as the singers, Chase Breedlove was singer number 3 out of 6, and for reasons I'm not going into it right now, he had to leave the project. When he eventually came back, and he is the guy you hear singing all the songs, except for obviously the one that has a woman singing it, I asked him, he had already proven that he could write lyrics and melodies, so I asked him, hey, look, I don't really like this chorus melody. It just doesn't seem to work for me. It hasn't worked for anybody else either. Can you see if you can fix this? And he said yes. To my surprise, when Chase worked on that, he changed everything, all the lyrics, all the vocal melodies throughout the song, including the ones that I actually really liked. So I had to consider then, okay, what are we going to do? But the other thing is that he slightly changed the meaning of the lyrics. So the first subject was what I said a minute ago, was more about something like a teenager being upset with friends and family not listening. Chase changed it more into a therapist not listening to a patient and just kind of assuring them everything's going to be fine. And I didn't really want to go that direction. As I said to Chase, it could be misinterpreted as us taking a stab at therapists, like, you shouldn't go to therapists because they're not going to help you. And I didn't want that interpretation to be a thing. And I know he didn't mean it that way, but I was already anticipating this could be taken wrong. If anything, I feel like more people should be willing to go to therapy to get some help. So I didn't want to give the wrong impression. Apparently one of my cats is putting in an appearance in this video, as he often does when I'm trying to record. So I decided to change what the song is about for a 3rd time, and this is the final version. This time it's more about someone telling you it gets better or just hang in there. One of these phrases we've all heard, and I think people mean well when they say these phrases, but they can be considered condescending or dismissive, like you're not really listening. You're not seeing how much trouble I really am in. I need more substantive feedback from you on something I can do, so that's what it's about now. Now, when it comes to the vocal melodies, I still really liked my verse melodies, and I didn't like chases. So, as the guy behind Black Halo, the great thing is I get veto power. So, the verse melodies are all mine, and the lyrics in the verses are also all mine. Now, that said, I did change some of them a little bit because now the context, the subject had slightly changed. So, some of those lyrics that could be interpreted in a whiny sort of way, they had now subtly changed because of the context, even though the line itself was still exactly the same. Chase was able to rewrite the chorus melody and basically fix this for me. So that was great. It's, again, another thing I love about working with someone else who also has the ability to write. Now, that said, if you were to listen to the original chorus melody, which is played by a lead guitar at the beginning of the song, and then maybe run that through your head while you're listening to the chorus melody and Chase singing the new version, you can tell they start very differently from each other, but towards the end, they get a little bit similar. It's almost like he based it a little bit on some of what I was doing. The words in the chorus are pretty much all Chase except for one of the lines. He was referring to the therapist in there, and I changed it because that didn't make any sense. Now that was from the second subject when the song was taking aim at therapist. With that gone, I had to change it. So that's the contribution I had to the chorus at that point as far as the lyrics. A similar thing happened with the bridge before the solo. Chase completely rewrote that. I decided to keep his melodies and the first two vocal lines as far as the lyrics. Those are his as well. I did change the last lyric he sings before the guitar solo. I forget what he had there before, but it wasn't a very important sentiment, and I felt like it should be something that was a little more dramatic, so I changed it to being whatever it is now, something like wanting to live your life free, which is a pretty basic, important sentiment for all of us. Upon Deaf Ears is ultimately one of the songs that has the most back and forth collaboration between Chase and I. And I think it really came together well in the end. And as I said at the beginning, this is the first song that we released. I always felt it was one of the strongest songs on the album in a commercial sense. And I know the metalheads out there don't like commercial stuff, but there's a place for this kind of thing. There's certainly heavier songs on the album. There's lighter songs on the album. This to me was kind of the middle of the road. And to me, it also kind of firmly established what the band sounds like. Along with the Wake, I feel like Upon Deaf Ears is one of the songs that can give you a pretty good idea from one song what Black Halo sounds like. There aren't too many performance notes from the song. Granted, this was recorded a long time ago, so the memory's starting to go. But one of the things that I do remember is that at the end of the guitar solo, there was a kind of a pause on a chord, and the drummer hit the hi-hat 3 times. And we used his real hi-hats, and it just didn't sound right. It sounded kind of clunky. He eventually pointed that out to me, and I agreed with him, and I removed it. It's something that you can do with editing these days. And, I got Pro Tools up behind me. That's the software that I use to record. So I agreed with him, but I always wanted that there as part of the composition. So eventually I asked my mixing engineer, Drew, do you have a sample of, a good hi-hat that we can replace that with? It's possible to do sound replacement for something like drums. So that's actually how we got that in there, where it sounds a little smoother instead of the clunky hi-hat hits that were in the original performance. I don't know why that happened. It just was maybe the exact way he had the hi-hat open or close, because it's, that's the one where you step on the pedal and it can open. It can be a little tricky to have that in exactly where you want it to get the exact sound, and I think we just didn't have it. I guess the other performance note I will make is that this song was written on my black steel string acoustic, which is a 6-string. It's this one right here. However, the acoustic guitars that you hear on the song, I did use a 6-string on it, but it sounded better on a 12-string. And so that's the primary sound that you hear when you listen to it. But I can tell you, for whatever reason, there's something about that exact passage in the beginning. It is so hard for me to play that on the specific 12-string that I have. Now, I have different guitars, and one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes it is easier to play something on one guitar instead of another. And on that one, I only have one 12-string acoustic, so I really just had to suffer through that. I don't know how many takes I did of that to get it smooth, but it was brutal. And when you play the same passage over and over again for, let's say, half an hour to an hour, you start to get grooves in the tips of your fingertips from playing the exact same thing. Your hand is on the exact chords all the time. So that is one of the hardest things on the album. Even though in theory it shouldn't be, I think it really is just the combination of my physiology. I have narrow fingertips, which can be very advantageous. But I think in the case of the 12-string, where each finger is holding down 2 strings, I think the strings on that guitar, the pairs of strings are a little too far apart from my fingertips. And based on the nature of the passage itself, It's just really hard to perform that for me anyway. If you have any questions about the song that I didn't answer, feel free to put them in the comments and I'll answer them as soon as I can. And please remember to like the video and subscribe. We've got a lot more of this coming.